Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Podcast Digest. My name is Dan Lizette, and I want to thank you again for taking the time out of your week to listen to our show. I've got another great one here for you guys this week, but before we begin, I want to thank you for leaving the reviews, for following the show at Pod Digest on Facebook, facebook.com/the Podcast Digest. Feedback to the show is always appreciated. Of course, you can use email for that, thepodcastdigest@gmail.com. Let's move on to this week's show, folks. I've got Matt and John from That'll Play podcast, one of the shows I reviewed the earliest on, back on episode 3, way back on September 14th. They were the partner podcast, if you will, to How Is This Movie with Dana Buckler, a gentleman we spoke to a few weeks ago. So we are completing the circle by talking with Matt and John this week. Matt and John, welcome to the Podcast Digest.
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for having us, Dan.
Thanks for having us, Dan. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you guys, too, and thank you for taking the time to join us here on the Podcast Digest. I have been a fan of you guys' show for a long time. Like I said, I found it way back in September, right when I was kicking off this show, and the big mission for this show was to find some of the best stuff out there and let people know about it. And I definitely include you guys in that list. You guys have been at the top of my subscription list ever since I found you. I think that the work you do is amazing. But for any of those not familiar with that work, tell them a little bit about That'll Play and what they can expect should they start listening.
Sure. Well, That'll Play is a podcast that John and I started last May of 2014.
Yeah.
We cover a little bit of everything. As you know, we stay in the realm of entertainment. But John is a music aficionado, technical guy, loves music production and things like that, and I'm more of a movie buff. We are both big sports fans, so we cover everything in the realm of music, movies, sports, entertainment, but we consider ourselves, a little bit of a comedic presence as well, so we try to put a comedic spin on all the subjects that we cover as well.
Yeah, and we do a little bit of topical news in the mix, kind of bring it to a place where some current events intertwine in our show outline, and it works. I think it's a good balance of, recent news and stuff that we're interested in, and we try to work it out like that for each of our shows.
I think it's working. I think it's working great. Like I said, I've been a big fan for a long time now, and for any of those who can kind of I'm trying to figure out what a good parallel would be, and that's probably a compliment to That'll Play and what you guys are doing. I'm not sure that I've heard the exact type of show that you guys have. As you mentioned, it's sort of in a little bit of movies and a little bit of music, pop culture, entertainment, so on and so forth. So kind of how do you guys come up with each show? Each show tends to have sort of a different theme and or an interview or a guest. How do you guys kind of make those decisions on what you're going to cover each episode?
Well, I'm glad you said that nothing really kind of sounds like that's like us, because that was kind of one of our goals going into it, and so we really appreciate hearing that. And we've actually read that on a couple of the reviews we've gotten on iTunes, that no two shows that we've done have ever been really the same. We follow the same loose structure for every show, but we try to cover something a little bit different in that realm of entertainment, and bringing guests on who are professionals in either film, music, TV is a way that we've enjoyed kind of learning different things about the subjects that we're interested in.
Yeah, and it rounds it out a little bit.
Yeah.
You get some professional outlook from people that really know what they're doing out there. I mean, we get a couple of guests on for our episodes, and it levels it out. It gets us on our game. We love interviewing. We love talking to people, and it's a fun time. I think it's really enjoyable for us, and hopefully the listeners love it.
Yeah, and as far as the process, like on a week-to-week basis, we kind of sit down, or maybe every other week we'll sit down, we'll kind of plan out our upcoming shows, and we kind of just talk about what's going on in entertainment, what's going on in the news, things that we're interested in, people that we're interested in talking to, and a lot of the people we've interviewed or had on the show we've either found through podcasting, like fellow podcasters like yourself, and or just people who have tweeted about things that we enjoy, and we'll reach out to them and be like, listen, we love your work. Are you interested in coming on? And a lot of people are very receptive. So we've been lucky in that sense.
Yeah, and also what a few of the guests, we get some references from people that we know that go, hey, I think so-and-so might be really good for your show line up, ask them to come on and let them promote a project. And that'll kind of turn into a place where people can come and hang and talk about their recent projects, which I love and Matt loves. It helps out the listeners with, getting advice on their own projects and getting some feedback. So it's cool.
I think it's cool. That's for sure. I've really enjoyed some of them. I've come up with a lot of other people to follow on Twitter and been down the rabbit hole on some of your guests to kind of look into their projects and their background, the web series and different things like that. But before we get too much into the episodes themselves, let's do an origin story, so to speak. How did That'll Play come about?
That'll Play, it started in the summer of 2013.
Yeah, that's true.
Matt and I were tossing around the idea of getting a podcast going, and we did a pilot run. I think we did an episode or two just to get a feel for it.
You could barely call them an episode.
Yeah, I mean, we barely got through these episodes just because we didn't really have an idea of how we can outline the show and block it out, which over time it started to make sense once we revisited the idea the following summer. But we did a pilot run,
and that was kind of just the pilot run was just kind of see if we were comfortable behind the mics.
Yeah,
like if it was really something we'd be interested in doing.
Which any aspiring people in broadcast listening to this, your first run around with this, it's not going to be easy. We knew going into it, it's going to be a work in progress, and we kind of looked at it like that. We weren't like going, oh, we're going to be great off the bat, because we don't know if people are going to respond to our humor, our personalities. Yeah. And as you get more comfortable with your mic presence and you start to have a game plan, you feel more relaxed behind the mic.
Right, but that didn't come till much later.
That didn't come way later.
This first run that John's talking about in 2013 was so bad that it discouraged us for a while, that we kind of were like, we don't know if we could do this, and then we didn't pick it up again until a year later.
Yeah, and it had to come down with the gear that we were using because we weren't really getting the results that we were really hoping for.
Right.
And then, you invest, of course, with podcasting or with any broadcast venture, you have to really invest a little bit of money into your project. And we did that. And I think it helped us feel a little bit more confident with the sound quality. We can do more things with bits and playing show audio for the audience, and we were intertwining a lot of cool elements that I think you would find on regular broadcast areas of radio and TV.
And I think the main reason we tried that first test episode back in 2013 was just that, like we said, me and John, when we hung out, I mean, we've known each other for over 10 years now, since college, and when we would hang out back in college, it would just be us and our friends talking about films, music, TV, debating them, joking about them. And we're like, we want to have a show where we can make friends, have friends on, and just joke and talk about this stuff. And we think it's stuff that people are interested in and people will respond to. And slowly we discovered that was the case.
And just to add a little bit to what Matt just said, I remember one night we were hanging out in Matt's backyard. And it was one summer night, and we had a bunch of friends around the table just hanging. And I was like, you know what, this could be something.
Yeah,
this could be like a good show. And I think this was years ago, and I thought, I like the way the conversation's flowing. I think people are responding to what Matt and I are saying.
Yeah, we were always those two guys that kind of not carried the conversation,
but we grounded it enough where people would listen.
Right.
So. Maybe that was a little bit of some luck with us figuring this out. So,
yeah, and it grew from there.
So tell me how, when you guys gave it the first run back in 2013 and you weren't satisfied with what happened and then decided to come back a year later, if anyone else, say, was considering starting a podcast themselves, found themselves in a similar situation, well, maybe their first episode or first attempt they weren't happy with, or they got feedback that it wasn't that great. I know you see a lot of podcasts out there that you will hit iTunes, they'll try one or two, and then they'll never do it again. What did you guys learn in that process in terms of coming back for more, with a different approach? You mentioned some equipment upgrades, but from a mindset standpoint, like, how did you guys say, we still got this, we're going to give it a try?
Oh, well, from a mindset standpoint, we realized after, and even when we came back in 2014 and started doing it for real, we realized after a few episodes that this is not something that we can just do willy-nilly, like, and just go in every week and kind of wing it. I mean, I'm sure there's some people who can do that, and God bless them. I mean, I guess we're not that talented, but like we do have to do a little bit of planning each week and kind of loosely block out what we want to talk about, and then we can riff off of that. Like, but we tried the just winging it approach, and it just did not work. So that's, advice that I would give to anyone who, really thinks that they can just go on and do a show. It's a little bit of work.
Yeah, and I remember those earlier episodes, maybe the first five to six episodes in, we were still feeling out the outline process. And yeah, like riffing is tough. To improvise and be entertaining on the mic, that's not an easy thing to do. And we're not seasoned comedians, or we don't do public speeches every day of our lives. So for us, we needed some kind of just a little push, a little something to cement us and keep us, researching and keeping our game up and learning how to do this. So,
and my advice would be to anyone who's doing it and not finding success right away, I'd say just keep experimenting. Like, do something different every episode. Find a format or find a subject matter that makes you comfortable behind the microphone. Like, if you're trying to do a show about movies, for instance, and you're trying to do a straight up review show and it's not working, try something different.
That's a good point.
Try a different spin on a movie show. We have several friends like Dana from How Is This Movie, who does a different spin and found success with it. So just keep experimenting, play around, and see what you're comfortable with.
Stick to what you know, which is the best advice that we received from people.
Sure.
And I think if you're gonna go in and you're gonna try and be very topical and politics, and that's a rough place to be. That's a tough market to hit with a podcast. And we wanted to keep it light. We wanted to keep our audience more on the fun side, of entertainment, and keep it, loose and kind of laid back.
Yeah, don't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's all great advice. I would echo just about every single one of those sentiments, and it does take a process. And I just would add on to in the advice giving session is that first do it for yourself. If you come out in episode 1 and you want to rule the world with millions of downloads and become a celebrity, it won't take long before you decide this isn't for you. But if you do this because you enjoy it and you love talking with your co-host, or you really love the material, or that one person who sends you a message that they enjoyed what you did will keep you going, then you're looking at the right thing to get into. But if you're trying to become the next Marc Maron,
right,
don't set those expectations.
Oh, well, don't get us wrong. Mainstream celebrity is our ultimate goal.
Yeah,
we're looking to be on red carpets, doing the town, champagne, all that.
Yeah, we want to be out there in the public.
We're going to talk about your plans for the future, but I imagine that those are probably all in them. Those are good goals as far as I'm concerned.
Listen to our show knows that we're joking.
Yeah, that's complete joking around there.
So about the history and the origin, tell me about this title.
Oh, that's a funny, quirky story.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Well, That'll Play came out of a joke, and Matt and I happened to be golfing one afternoon with some buddies, and there was a guy.
We got paired up with someone.
Yeah, we got paired up with a gentleman that was a little bit older than us.
Gentleman's a loose term.
Yeah, like most golfing outings when you're kind of the youngest guys on the course.
Mm-hmm.
And he said something that stuck in my head.
Every time he or we hit a ball, no matter where the ball went, it could have been a terrible shot, it could have been a great shot, he said something after everyone hit.
And he happened to say, "That'll play."
Yeah.
And this is a couple years before we started, or maybe a year before we started the pilot, I think.
Yeah.
And it stuck in my head, and I just liked it. I liked the way it sounded, and I'm like, wow, that's cool.
And we kept hearing it all day because it was like, ding, that'll play. Ding, that'll play.
For 9 holes.
So it just stuck in our head, and we're like, that could be a good tagline for a show one day, because we had always kind of had a show in the back of our mind because we did a radio show in college. So we were always kind of, just in conversation and would throw around ideas for a show every once in a while. And after that day, it just stuck.
Yeah, and then we were searching around for names for the show, and I told Matt, hey, let's go with that. That'll play. I think we can really have fun with it, and it means a lot. It can mean anything, pretty much.
Right.
I mean, the term obviously means something that's kind of, you do okay
Yeah.
and you settle on it, and that was like the inside joke for us.
Right. It, like John says, it encompasses all that we talk about. Like it can relate to sports, it can relate to movies, and it became like a nice little sign off kind of catchphrase for us at the end of every show. We end every show with, "Oh well, that'll play." And it's a little bit of a humbling phrase at the end of every episode too, because in sports it kind of just means, yeah, that's good enough.
That's doable. Yeah, so I mean that's a little bit of the behind the scenes with that title, but yeah, I appreciate you asking us that question about it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think most people don't know what it means. So
Well,
it's good to
I
get
think
it
the
out
next
there.
step now is that you need, business cards with That'll Play, and then you need to go golfing again and try to find this guy. And the first time he says it to you, hand him a card.
This guy was ridiculous. I think he was homeless. He looked like very ragged. Like he'd been wearing the same clothes for about 10 days. He stunk like alcohol, I think, and it had a golf bag, but only with like 4 clubs in it. So I don't know where this guy came from, but he just disappeared into the mist after
Yeah,
that
well,
game.
if we ever see him again, we gotta shake his
thank
hand.
him. Yeah.
and,
I've seen my fair share of homeless people, but I've never, with the signs, but I've never seen them begging for greens fees.
Right.
That's good. That's a good point, Dan.
That would be interesting, though. I'm sure there's someone out there, who takes up a collection all day and then hits the course. Forget
Right.
about the liquor store.
I'm sure there's at least one. We found him.
So let me ask you guys this, talking about the show, and you mentioned the relaunch in 2014 when you really started getting going. Off the bat in those first several episodes, did you guys start to receive listener feedback, and was it positive, or how were those early days for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we had the first couple episodes we didn't even have it on iTunes or Stitcher or anything like
We had
that.
it on
right off the
SoundCloud
bat.
for the first couple episodes.
Yeah, because we were kind of still keeping it a little bit in-house, and we kind of were experimenting with it, but we would show it to friends, family, people within our inner circle and get feedback. And, for the most part, it was positive. They thought the shows were really funny, showed our personality really well, but they all agreed that they needed more of a structure. So they're like, it's great that you guys can just go on and riff for an hour and it could be funny. Like, it shows that you have a presence behind the mic, but really you guys don't talk about much. Like, that was the problem, is that the first few episodes were just us kind of going on and talking about whatever.
Yeah, we were kind of getting in there and just digging up anything.
Yeah, we were experimenting.
Yeah, and then once you find content, which is another good thing to kind of always strive for with doing this stuff, is keep in mind what you want to say.
Right.
And like always have it in the back of your mind, like there's going to be someone that's going to really dig what you're going to bring out there, and write it down. Like, just, Matt and I do show prep during the week, and we just write down our ideas.
Right.
If there's a news bit that happens, we want to talk about it. And now that we've made segments up for the show, it blocks out the episode a little bit better.
Sure.
And it actually made it a lot easier for us.
So we're almost 30 episodes in now. And we went through different periods where we would do a show every week, and then we did a bi-weekly schedule for a while. So, but at the beginning, after our first 3 episodes, I believe, that's when we kind of decided to go all in with it. We went up on iTunes because we were starting to get some downloads on SoundCloud, and we're like, okay, people are showing interest in this. And then we would get some people tweeting at us or emailing us, with compliments. So we decided to go all in. And then once we started, playing the show out better, the feedback was almost unanimously positive.
And I remember when we didn't have any of our social media outlets finalized.
Oh, that was a funny moment.
We were, if anyone wants to like go back and hear something funny, it's like Matt and I at each end of the episode were like, well, we'll have a Twitter soon and our website soon. It was like we were building the show up around, what we were doing, and everything that goes along with it, the website and, designing our logo, and like we were doing it as we were going. So we really didn't have we kind of just were flying really quick with this.
And it wasn't until episode 4 that we really were happy with the kind of how the structure was going. And then until episode 5, when we had our first guest, that we really said, okay, like, this is a lot of fun, and like we could do something really cool with this.
Yeah, and the third mic, having someone in there every now and then, it helps. It kind of eases us a little bit, and we're not as stressed out, and we can rely on someone else bringing some content to the show as well.
And I think I mentioned it actually in my review way back in September. I love the website. I think the website looks great. And in terms of sort of the branding and the logos that you guys have put together, it's impressive. So kudos for that. What is the sort of backstory there? Do one of you have a background in that area?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a graphic designer by trade. That's my day job. But I can't take full credit for the website. I mean, it is a WordPress template of sorts, but the logo or any other graphic material you see on the website or on our social media is from me. We just launched a new kind of mini episode series called Queued Up that we can talk about later, but I had to design a new logo for that. So I try to keep the branding and the look of our show consistent, and that's one thing that I bring to the table. John's more on the technical end as far as the audio, so we have a nice balance where it's like John edits the show, puts it together, and I manage the website and the branding. So we kind of balance each other out well, on and off the mic. So I think it's a good thing. And we appreciate that we get compliments on the site and on the logo all the time. So
yeah, that's huge.
We appreciate you saying that. And, just quick side note, like, we really appreciate your review from back in September. Like, it was very flattering.
Absolutely.
And unexpected. But we listened to your show ever since, so we really appreciate that.
But as Matt was saying with the audio, doing that is a tough thing. I mean, no matter how many times you turn on the mic, you're always going to experience something, whether it's, for anyone that's into the technical end of broadcast, room buzz, you're getting stuff in the mic, the room generates weird noises and you're trying to figure out where it's coming from, or, sometimes something in your mixer might be tweaked a little bit differently from the last time you recorded, and you have to problem solve really quick. And when we do like interviews via Skype or, we have to do our homework. We make sure all the gear is working beforehand.
One of my favorite things about doing the show is when we have a guest on, watching John squirm when we have audio problems before a guest comes on. I mean, I feel bad for him because like I'm not as knowledgeable with that stuff as he is, but it's funny at the same time. Watching him get stressed out about it.
I should just record those sessions of me going, fumbling with the mic. And
I've said that. The B-sides.
We got to release some B-sides. But yeah, I mean, no matter which level of broadcasting you're in, whether you're in the big leagues, doing stuff for Fox News, or you're just doing a podcast like us, you're going to experience some kind of technical issues along the lines, and you can't be discouraged. I mean, after a while, Matt and I were just like, you know what? We're handling it the best we can. We don't have an engineer in here to help us. Well, we can just focus on the guest or the content. It's us. It's a two-man show, and, it's a lot to balance, but I think we handle it all right.
And the website, websites for podcasts are important because I know a lot of podcasts don't really think about that. It's kind of just like a hub for where they host their shows, and that's fine. But coming from the design and branding background that I have, like, I kind of wanted to make that important for us because it's something that people identify with. Now, I feel like our logo and our colors and our brand is kind of unmistakable among the podcast community now. So something I'm proud of.
Yeah.
And I think that you should be, and I think you're exactly right, because what a website is to a podcast is sort of tying into what you guys were talking about with sound quality. Each and every one of these things are opportunities to set yourselves apart from the rest. And if you can make a statement or stake a claim to excelling in one and hopefully all areas, that's only going to bring more and more audience to what you guys do. So I think it's very important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we direct our audience to go to, our website, which is thatwillplaypod.com. After shows, we'll upload the episodes within, a day or two of recording, just because it takes some editing time. But we try to keep as much content up there as possible, whether it's, writing a quick blog about something that happened in movie news or music or whatever. And it's like a home base. So the show never really ends when we're done recording, because we're so busy with the Twitter feeds and interacting with fans.
We've noticed that with a lot of podcasts. I mean, you can't really just put your episode up and then not do anything. And for the and you do the same thing, Dan. We've interacted with you on Twitter. Like, you have to kind of stay active with your audience, and that part we find fun. I mean, at least I do, because I'm on Twitter all the time, like kind of interacting with fans or with fellow podcasters, and it's fun just to keep the conversation going throughout the week.
It keeps the it's like the show never ends, as I say. I think you got to keep your fans engaged. So
sure,
we're trying to balance our time with that, and I think it's working out okay.
Well, and one of the things I think that's great about what you guys do and what I attempt to do and what I think some of the best social media presence podcasts out there do as well is that, your interaction can't just be show announcements. And I know I put a lot of show announcements out there, but when you start to engage the audience in another way, commenting on some type of personal reference that they've made or responding back to their show announcements with kudos or something of that nature, that's when people start to develop an affinity for your brand. That realizes that, especially those of us who have show accounts, that it is an actual real person behind the show account, and they start to engage with the person, which is a whole nother level beyond the show, right? When your audience identifies with you as well as your show, that's when you really have that engaged audience, and I think that's all the difference.
Yeah, I mean, once you start involving people that are legit in their respected industries, like I mentioned before, like when we have a few guests come on, you want to seem like you know what you're doing, and that they're not just coming on your show and you're just doing this for, something to occupy your time for an hour during the week. We like to, show good face and keep everyone engaged and, make a well-presented piece of social media to just show everyone. And you have to have a nice, good balance between your design work and the time that you have to put the content up. So it's a lot of figuring out, but as Matt, he's on top of the social media a lot. I'm on top of it, and it kind of makes it a little bit more appealing for people that we want to get on the show. And
but as
listeners.
Dan was saying, like us, like we are people behind the show, and it's nice when you see people actually from other shows kind of commenting or complimenting your episodes.
Yeah.
And I make a point to whenever I listen to someone else's episode, to try and reach out to them on Twitter and be like, nice job on that show. And it's nice when you get that in return because these podcasters know what we're going through on a weekly basis. Like, they're doing the same kind of grind that we're doing. So it's nice. I feel like because we get compliments from people outside of podcasting, which are great, but from inside the podcasting community almost means a little bit more because they're doing what we're doing. So it's like getting respect from your peers is very important.
Yeah, that peer recognition is definitely a big deal. And I sort of waded, waist deep into the podcast community, given the content of this show in terms of recommending podcasts to folks. So I know that the podcast community has been wildly supportive of what I do. And I know from just as a, third-party observer, I know that you guys have been very well received as well. But let's segue on to the comment that we've been alluding to. I'd like to talk more about these guests. You guys have had everything, I can tell, from family to friends to industry professionals and experts and creatives. Tell us a little bit about sort of the idea behind involving guests, what you guys are looking to accomplish, and how that has grown over these, I think you guys are about, 28, 29 episodes in, give or take?
Yeah. Well, the number one thing that we wanted to accomplish when we started bringing on guests, which I think was episode 5, was our first guest, was they had to relate somehow to the content that we talked about on a show-to-show basis, meaning something within the entertainment industry or technology or sports or movies, music, whatever. But they also had to be passionate about what they did. Like, if it was someone who's just going to come on and do a couple plugs and get out, like, we didn't want guests like that. We wanted people who love what they did, who had some know-how and our listeners could learn something from them. So a lot of our, like you said, our guests were friends and family at first. That, like, my sister came on, who's a English teacher, and she's also a literature and movie buff, and she talked about the TV series Lost with us, and it was a fascinating episode. She kind of broke it down. So we have guests like that on who are just people who are close to us, but then we've had guests that are actually working professionals in the TV or movie industry who bring that, in-field expertise to the show, which is really fascinating to us, because I've always said that if we weren't in the careers that we're in now, like, we would have loved to have been in the TV and film industry. So it's nice to hear from people who are actually doing that on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and with our guests, I enjoy just the storytelling, and like Matt said, like plugging, and yeah, we want them to plug their projects, and we don't want them just there to plug, because the audience is going to get bored of it. You want some good stories involved on top of the promotion of the projects. And we've had interviews where I think some were better than others, and that's going to happen. I think when any kind of interviewing situation, you're not going to always get the gold that you're looking for, and you have to be respectful of the people you're interviewing. You don't want to name drop if they have a big celebrity on their project. You don't want to force them to bring that up. You want to be respectful of their connections and the people that they're associated with. And to a certain extent, we feel like we have to go over the show outline with our guests just to make sure they're at ease and comfortable, because we don't want anyone to be frightened coming on.
Sure. And I think having our people who are close to us or in our inner circle, having them as our first few guests really helped us kind of get comfortable.
It was good practice
with interviewing people. Like, there was no pressure. It was kind of just, we were hanging out with people we already knew, and so it was fun and it was loose. And then when we finally had our first guest, who was a stranger to us on, was it Dana who was our first guest?
I think
outside of our family.
Yeah, I think it might have been Dana.
Yeah, Dana from How's This Movie. I think he might have been our first out. And when we had him on, we were amazed at how smoothly it went. And then from that point on, we started reaching out to other people outside of our circle, and it just grew from there. And we got to the point where people started even, either messaging us on Twitter or reaching out to us via email asking if they can come on the show, which is awesome. Like, it's a great feeling.
Yeah. Right.
And a welcome reception. And
we've been getting really good support from BroadwayWorld.com. We've had a little bit of history with them in the last couple of months, since last year, and they're very supportive of posting our shows up with people that are doing stuff in the industry.
Yeah, so that's the way we've gotten referrals from them, because we did an interview with with Matt Timonini, who's their TV and film critic, and he referred us to the two actors and directors who wrote the web series The Residuals. So we got to interview them and meet them, and they were awesome people. And that's the great part about doing all these guest spots. The networking, and we've met some awesome people. And now meeting you today, Dan, it's just... It's really cool how we could, these are people we would have never known about if we didn't do this podcast.
Right.
And they all have great stories, and they've been really nice so far, with the exception of one that stands out in my mind.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into that.
No, we got to be professionals.
Yeah. But it's grown from there, and it's been a good ride.
Yeah, and that site has been very supportive of us, and they've been excellent. I can't say anything better about them. They're just awesome people. Matt Timonini coming on board to do a couple of guest spots for us and be interviewed, and it's cool. It's a good relationship when people outside of your circle want to join in on the fun, and that's what it was all about. And we're going to continue to grow like that. So.
And folks, I've been telling you, obviously, since last September that I think you should be out there subscribing to That'll Play. But if you're just now doing it because you've just now jumped on board here at the Podcast Digest and you're searching through that catalog and you found That'll Play and you're hitting that subscribe button like I know you're doing right now, the episodes with Matt Timonini were some of my favorites. I think I've even let you guys know that on Twitter. I think he's a great guest. He sounds like he could go for hours in terms of talking about so many of these subjects, and he's always got an opinion, and I love when it differs from you guys, because then that conversation and debate starts to get going. And I think he's a great guest. It shocks me, and maybe he does, and I just don't know about it, but boy, he should have his own podcast.
Oh yeah, we've actually said that to him, and he's extremely humble, outside of being an awesome guest, and we totally agree. Our first show we did with him was our longest show by far. It was a little over 2 hours.
It was a long one.
We normally keep our shows around an hour, give or take, but we looked down at the clock and just 2 hours had gone by and we didn't even realize it, and he was still going, and I felt bad that we kind of had to pump the brakes on him a little bit. We're like, Matt, we got to wrap this up, and which is why we had to have him back and why we plan on having him back as a regular guest.
Yeah,
because he's just he's awesome. And those are the type of people that we love having on. He's so passionate about all the things that he's interested in, and we've had a bunch of people like that. I mean, my cousin Wes has come on, who has a movie blog, and he's just like spills over with passion and just can talk for hours about movies. And it's like, if you're like that and you're passionate about something like that, reach out to us by all means. Like, we want to talk to you. So like, that stuff is a blast.
Yeah, it's great. It's a good time. And you know, we when you got people that really know what they're talking about, you learn something. Or like Matt and I learn something every day when we're doing this, just because we're still learning the process. And I think we're getting better as we go along. And the people that you talk to definitely help you round out your skills
For sure.
broadcasting.
Yeah, and the episode you mentioned there with Wes, that's another great one, folks, to go back and listen to. I think he was on twice, correct?
He was on twice. Yeah, most recently it was a episode called Under the Influence, when we talked about the films and television and music that have influenced us throughout our life. And like I said, it's just like an hour worth of just passionate discussion about movies. And if you're like a geek like we are about some of this stuff, like, I think you'll really get a kick out of it. And he's another guy I said could have his own podcast easily.
Yeah, and I think the first time he was on is when he relayed the running into Martin Scorsese, correct?
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's a good story.
I loved that story. That was such a cool story.
And that is by far our most downloaded and most popular episode still to date. And I think that's part of the reason why, is because that story really resonated with people. We got a ton of tweets about it, ton of comments on Facebook, and just like, he could easily have his own show, like I said, and just that show was just a lot of fun.
And he's got a lot of good one-liners.
Yeah, and
he's not shy of
my cousin, and I didn't even know that story until about a week before we recorded that episode. I had never heard that story from him before, and we weren't like a little backstory here briefly. We were kind of disconnected for a while. We hadn't talked to each other in about 10, 15 years, and we kind of reconnected via social media because I saw that he had a film blog and I had a movie podcast, and we kind of messaged each other, realized how passionate the other one was about movies, and we're like, dude, we got to do something together. And then we've been reconnected and become great friends since. So it's like not only helped us with content for the show, but like helped me reconnect with family. So it's like, you know, that's the ultimate reward that I've gotten out of this show so far, is that it's brought my family closer together, which has been, and now him and John are good friends, and it's like, it's really cool that stuff like this has happened through the show.
I would have never thought this podcast would cement families back together.
Right.
For us, it was just like, let's do something fun and enjoy ourselves. And when it goes to a different level like that, it's like, wow, you know, we're doing something really cool here.
Yeah, so that those episodes are special to me in
sentimental
particular.
value.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, those are definitely some of the great shows as well. And I want to highlight another one, because I think that this was the one, looking at the date, I'm on the website now scrolling back, this was the one that I listened to when I said, I'm recommending these guys and what they're doing. And this was back from August 17th, Moxie Lady with Jessica Howell. I really loved that. Jessica came through. I listen to a ton of podcasts, right? I mean, that's sort of my shtick here. I listen to a ton of podcasts, and I listen to a ton of interview shows. Jessica Howell came through so great with you guys, and I'd love to know sort of the background and backstory about how that came to be and what have you, because it sounded like you guys were three old friends sitting around, and it came off so well. Kind of how did that whole episode come together?
Yeah, you know what? She's awesome. I mean, and she's actually, quick side note, she's going to be coming back on the show in a couple months, so stay tuned for that. But the way that came about was actually one via social media. That was kind of just by chance. She started following our show. She retweeted a couple of our episodes, and you know, I could tell that she was kind of paying attention to what we were doing. So I reached out to her and I was like, hey, listen, I looked at her website and I saw that she had done some film and TV work, and a lot of her comedy work on her website was very funny.
She had a very eclectic body of work.
Her sense of humor was right up our alley. So we're like, you know, let's see if she wants to do the show. I reached out to her. She was very receptive. She's like, yeah, let's do it. She's like, I'd love to talk to you. You know, we spent a couple weeks playing the show with her, you know, back and forth, either via text or via email, kind of bouncing ideas back and forth. And we hooked up via Skype, and she couldn't have been more friendly and receptive to the podcast format. And she was just all in with it. And was very receptive to our kind of format of improvising and kind of, being very loose with
because that's her background.
the content.
I mean, she gets it, and she's like Jessica. How can I describe her? She's like the friend you always wanted to have in your group.
Made it very easy right off the bat.
And for us, we were going into this pretty prepared because she was just about to get onto a really popular show on Showtime.
And for that reason, I think we weren't nervous, but we were like, oh, we want to make this a good interview because she's done some legit work and we want to highlight her well. We don't want to come off like amateurs and stuff like that. So we were a little bit nervous going into it, and she put us at ease right away.
Yeah, I mean, she was a guest on Masters of Sex last August. She did a spot on there, and it was cool. Like, she was just very down to earth about it. She wasn't like saying, "Oh, I'm going to be on this big TV show," and I'm all that. It was just like, "Oh, it's my gig. I'm doing this." And
she's someone who,
and I love that. I love how people are just so like. I react better to people like that.
Yeah,
where
definitely.
You feel like, oh, it's a job. They're not looking at it like they're going to be.
And she certainly does.
Yeah, it's cool.
And she's one of those actresses she's doing little projects all the time, like little short films that she posts on her website. She does independent films with a couple of her friends, on a weekly basis. So she's a working creative person, which is like she couldn't have been more fascinating to talk to and more friendly. Like I said, she'll be coming back on, so we're really looking forward to that.
I'm looking forward to that too, because I really love that episode. And what was ironic was I started tweeting about that episode, and then she started following me, it's great that she's so engaged and obviously is a fan of podcasts, and it's great to hear that she's coming back because she came through so well on that interview and in that episode. I mean, it was one of the things I think that's great about podcasts is that people talk about all the time that it's such an intimate medium in the terms that most people are listening with earbuds by themselves while they're not. Obviously, if you're listening to something, you're probably not interacting with anyone else. Kind of hard to do both at the same time. So you start to develop these bonds with the people on the other end of those earbuds. And she was able to do that with, inside of that 60 or 80 minute episode to the point it was like, that's a super cool person. I'm going to look her up and find out what she does. And, oh, look, she's in this. I want to check that out, and so on and so forth. Right. And to do that inside the span of one episode, so to speak, is a compliment to her. And I wish her well and look forward to her return.
Yeah, I mean, she knows how to roll with it. And like as we call it,
isn't that her username? If I remember her Twitter handle,
and she lives up to it because I'm
shameless, John.
I'm bringing it around here. She knows how to just wing it and just be lax about stuff, and that's how Matt and I are pretty much operating. To this very day.
And if you can't be that way as a podcaster, like me and John personally are probably not going to listen to your show. Like that's just like we feel like that's a necessity if you're going to be a podcaster. Like you got to be able to kind of roll with the punches because not everything is going to work out 100%.
Oh yeah, and I think with podcasting, it's filling in the gaps. And Matt and I bring this up a lot on our show. The podcasting is filling in the gaps with broadcast radio, even to satellite radio to a certain extent, because you can get a whole slew of content and hear from people that you wouldn't really get in those other outlets with the bigger media presences. For us, I think this is a good time because, I mean, obviously, FM radio and stuff like that, you're not getting the content like you are with podcasts. So this is like, if you're doing something like this is your time to run with it and take the ball and do what you want. And, the industry is changing too. And people are listening. No matter, that's why Matt and I are like, we gotta be like, we're doing our own radio show here. Because essentially that's how it's kind of formulating a little bit.
Yeah.
With segments and...
We do kind of have that format now.
And we've grown up on regular radio, when we were younger, and we miss that. We miss the really edgy content and the really fun intellectual end of having a discussion. But for the most part, a lot of stations out there aren't doing, 3-hour shows in the morning. So it's weird. It's like now podcasts are kind of filling in the gap.
I completely agree with that as well. And talking about sort of the different segments and different things that you guys have sort of, interjected into the show at different times. One of the things that I wanted to highlight as well, and I've sort of alluded this before in a comment I made, but I wanted to talk with you guys about it in terms of your decision to do these type of things, and then to let you sort of know as a listener how I thought of them. One of the things you guys did in the episode immediately following was on this Montreal expose, the trip to Montreal, and then a subsequent episode a few weeks later with a story about the Halloween costumes. Those two instances, those two installments, if you will, I sort of talked about how I think that people really get tagged into or sucked into a podcast because they identify personally with the host. And the story that you guys relayed about, a lot of the Montreal experiences and then the Halloween stuff, I thought was, believe it or not, some of the best segments of That'll Play. And that includes when you guys bring in these guests from the, professional enterprises or the family members and so on and so forth. When you guys are just riffing on the stories, kind of what I would consider to be maybe the original idea behind That'll Play, I think those are excellent. Can hold up segment-wise with so many of these other ones as well. Kind of wanted to hear about like the thought process behind that. Do you guys plan on continuing that element, so on and so forth?
Oh, well, first of all, thank you for saying that.
Yeah, that's great.
Really good to hear because, like you said, you said it perfectly. Like it harkens back to our original idea about the show, and it was originally just going to be me and John. We had never envisioned guests really at first, and we like to stay true to that, which is why even as our guests have become more consistent, like it used to be maybe once a month we'd have a guest. Now it's kind of every other week, almost sometimes every week. But we like to block off 10 minutes, 15 minutes at the top of the show that it's just me and John before we bring the guest on, because we like to kind of keep that identity. And we are going to try and bring back, I know it's been a little while, it's been a few weeks since we did a solo episode, but actually the one we'll be releasing this week will be just me and John. We're going to do a little bit of catch up between me and him, and we do think that's important. Like we are the show at the end of the day, and we can't lose that part of it. And it's awesome to hear that people like yourself identify with those stories, because those stories are the reason that we started this show. Like we have some funny things that
a lot of weird things
in our past, and we haven't even scratched the surface on a lot of the stories that we have. So we look forward to filling the gaps between guest appearances with these funny anecdotes that have just made up our friendship, really.
And it's great to share stories and be engaging like that, because there's so much great material from our lives that we can't keep it bottled in, and sometimes you just got to let it loose. And even though you're on a public forum like this, and at the end of the day, everyone's gone through something really ridiculous or something happened to them, and we're no stranger to that stuff, and we like to keep it. We want to share it, and we like to spend the time, describing what's going on with our lives.
One of my favorite moments regarding this is, I think it was around the time of the Halloween episode. I'm not sure if it was on that same episode, but it was when I had come back from Indiana.
Oh, that's another good one too.
And it was about my plane ride back to New York, and I hadn't told John this story before we started recording because I wanted him to react genuinely on the air to it. And I teased it to him beforehand. To those who don't know, I almost died on my way back from Indiana to New York on a plane ride, and it was a hysterical experience.
That means I would have had to find a new co-host.
Yeah, so I teased it to John. That's the first concern of John's, by the way.
I was just who can I book this week?
And it was great because his reactions were genuine on air, and I thought it made for a great genuine moment on the show. And those are the type of things we want to keep injecting into it. And as you'll see this week with our solo episode that's going to be dropping in a couple days, we're going to keep bringing that stuff, and we're going to keep being ourselves. And I think that's important.
Yeah.
You guys talked about some of those memories. You just relayed that one there. Looking back from sort of the beginning up until now, if you guys had to pick one moment, one experience, one incident, one what have you, what would be sort of the best thing to come from this so far, or the best memory or best story from That'll Play so far?
In terms of production wise,
any of it.
Is that what you mean, Dan?
Whatever comes to mind when you think back about this process so far.
That's a tough question because so much has happened.
Yeah, it's amazing how much we've changed throughout the only 30 episodes, less than 30 episodes. But.
Yeah, I think some of the most enjoyable things.
I know you really like the Residuals experience with the video.
That actually was one of my proudest moments of the show. to explain the story to you and your audience, Dan, we recorded a episode with the Residuals, who have a phenomenal web show that's going to be broadcasted on BroadwayWorld.com this year. We were linked up through Matt Tamanini, who referred them to us and said, "Hey, I think you should interview these guys. They're great. They're good friends of ours." So Matt and I are like, "Let's do it." I mean, they were doing something legit, and we watched all the episodes and we loved it. We fell in love with the show right away.
Yeah.
So instead of doing like the typical Skype chat or doing something with us just in a room recording audio, I thought, hey, let's get in a studio and hook up some GoPro cameras and record this and let's have some fun.
Yeah, them being TV and film actors, we wanted to really highlight their personalities, and we thought that just audio only would not do for them.
No.
So getting in front of a camera for them was really important to us.
So if for your audience, the episode's called Commercial Appeal, and we discuss their show, the production behind it, and it really highlights the struggles and the rewards of doing your own web show. And Mike and Jillian, big shout out to them.
Super nice.
They were
people.
just humble and just nice, and the personalities that they have are fantastic. And they were along for the ride with this project of ours, and we rented out a friend's studio.
And I know you really, though, being a production guy,
Yeah.
John's really into the production end of things, as people could probably tell.
It was in my wheelhouse.
But he really loved combining and it was great for me to get to watch him work on this, because we had a couple other people come in and help us with we had a 4-camera setup that day. It was very complex.
It pretty much resembled what you would see on live broadcast TV with camera switches.
Except with tiny GoPros.
And we had an SLR camera,
Yeah.
and
it was great to have to watch John and all these guys, kind of try and sync up the audio and the video aspect of it, and then cutting it together afterwards. It became this big project that I know John's very proud of. I'm very proud of. But from my end, it was just like I was coming in. I was just like the talent coming in to just talk, and John did all the grunt work behind it. So I know he's very proud of it.
And a really good aspect of this episode is that we did a lot of R&D with this, because we never tried this before. And I have friends that are knowledgeable in the audiovisual world, and that's their profession, their day job. So it was helpful to work with people which I think for any podcaster or someone doing a film project, is surround yourself with people that know what they're doing, and you're going to learn no matter what. But the really good highlights of that experience was that it pushed me, it pushed Matt, it pushed my friends involved in this project to really produce something awesome. And I think the turnaround for the editing was like a week, on top of our day-to-day real lives. I mean, there was some late nights, editing and Matt doing graphics.
Yeah.
And I wasn't getting much sleep because I wanted to get this stuff up and I wanted to showcase it because it was so good. It was probably one of the hardest things I had to do and Matt had to do for the podcast. And
yeah,
I think it
really
changed.
That hard for me.
Well, don't say that. I think your interviewing was just out of the ballpark.
Yeah, I'm really good. Yeah.
But the technical aspect of that episode, and we just really pushed ourselves.
It was a really cool episode. I definitely listened to the full-blown audio. I'd not gone back and check out the video, but after this description, I've got to see 4 GoPros in action. So check out the website, folks, to see the end result.
It's on our website. Sorry, Dan.
Yeah.
It's on our website somewhere, but it's also, we have a YouTube page if you search us on YouTube, and it's a 3-part video.
So we filmed the whole thing, the whole episode, and we blocked it out in 20 minutes for the video because it's tough to get anyone to sit down for 60 minutes and watch a show.
Yeah, we encourage people have definitely checked it out. It's gotten some views, but it's something that we're proud of, and we would love if more people see it. So, and we'd love to hear your feedback, Dan, when you do check it out.
I certainly will, and I'm going to put the link to your YouTube page in the show notes as well, folks, so you can check that out if you want to just click on right over there when we're done here and check out that video. Speaking of what you guys have planned and what you've done so far, what about the future? Where is That'll Play going in 2015 and beyond? What do you guys see happening?
Well, one thing we mentioned earlier is how we started to inject more and more segments or planned production pieces into the show. We started to do that slowly over time towards the tail end of 2014. with like different news segments. We did a quiz segment for a while, which we're going to start bringing back as well. We did a segment called, now that we do a regular segment called What We'll Play, which is where we recommend maybe a film or a album that kind of flew under the radar that we like to highlight. We do a Who Had the Worst Week,
That's fun.
which we've gotten good reception from.
That's a lot of fun to do that one.
We take 2 news stories of people who failed miserably throughout that week, and we kind of debate and joke about who had the worst week. So you're going to start to see more and more segments like that on the show, and we have a couple more in mind that we're going to start rolling out in the new year, and we're going to start getting our guests more involved with stuff like that. Like you mentioned, Jessica Howell, when she came on back in August, we didn't have any of those segments yet, so it was a straight up interview. But what we're looking forward to doing with her and other people when they come back is having their input on those segments and their comedic insight as well. So because those segments always work well with a third person in on it. So we're looking forward to seeing how that works with our guests as we go forward.
And the guest is like the tiebreaker.
Yeah.
And which is cool because you get like totally different response, and it brings more conversation to the table, and there's debates, and Matt and I don't agree on everything together, which you can't. You're going to have your disagreements on air with topics.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Opinions. Yeah, I don't know if you do either. but it's just funny because Matt and I could think, oh, this guy had the worst week, and then this person would be like, no, I think the other guy that you mentioned had it. And we go back and forth, and there's some banter. And
like you said, Dan, it's always more interesting when the guests or the hosts disagree a little bit on things, and it never really has gotten contentious. But we've had good-hearted debates on the show, and I always find that more engaging. Even when I'm listening to other shows, that's always more engaging.
Yeah.
And one other thing we're gonna do for the new year, which we actually just debuted this past week, is our first series of mini episodes, which is kind of our way, because we're normally a weekly podcast. We released one show a week, but we kind of wanted to bridge the gap between each episode and keep producing content for people to come back to the site and, stay engaged with us. So whenever we have a guest on, we're going to do a little mini episode called Queued Up, which is where we just kind of ask them 5 personal questions to kind of get them to know them better. And we're going to release those as like a 5 to 10 minute mini episode a couple days after the full episode is released. So we just did one last week with songwriter Shelley Piken. They're just simple, fun, lighthearted questions.
Yeah, we don't go too deep into anything.
And we riff off of it a little bit, and it's just a little way to kind of connect with the guest a little more personally, because sometimes the full interviews get a little technical. We talk about their career a lot, so it's a little bit more loose and lighthearted.
And we found out that a lot of our friends and the people that we're meeting, they're very loose by the end of the show, too. And the energy is still good, and we thought this is a good way to bring a little extra to the audience and kind of just round about the conversation with our guests. And then another thing is, we go over the questions beforehand just to make sure they know what they're going to say on air.
Sure.
Because I think for any podcaster listening, you have to have whoever you're having coming into your little circle, you got to have them as involved as possible.
Yeah, you don't want to blindside them with anything going in. So Shelley was very receptive to it.
She was great with this.
She had her answers queued up and really riffed on it with us, and we had a good time. So, well, like I said, it's called Queued Up. They'll be our consistent mini episodes from this point on, and we're having a lot of fun with that. And we're going to keep brainstorming as we go, and we're going to come up with little ideas like that as we go. But yeah, for now, that's what we got in the can.
And I think that was a great idea. I know when that arrived in my feed, I'm not sure if it was Friday or Saturday. I know I listened to it on Saturday, and I was like, oh, look, it's a 7-minute long That'll Play. I'm like, this is cool. And it was great to, like you said, throw that in and keep that going. And it was really interesting. And the guest, Shelley, from the most recent full episode, I guess we can say, was excellent. What a great conversations you guys had. And that's another one, folks, if you want to just kind of hit one of the most recent ones. That conversation about the music industry and the songwriting, and you guys started off with all the transition to digital and Spotify, and it was a really interesting conversation with somebody who had an angle on the topic that I hadn't heard from before, and I thought that was great.
Oh, thank you. That means the world to us, Dan. Shelley was just so full of information, and she's actually a Long Island native, so she's from our neck of the woods. We had some common ground with her. The conversation about the music industry, which I loved because it's one of my passions in life is music. Really brought an educational spin to the show, which we strive for.
It's one of our goals.
And it was one of, yeah, as Matt said, it's one of our goals. We just had a really good time learning about that industry, which I think a lot of people, they don't know a lot about, songwriting and making money off that art and that craft. It's not an easy thing to do. And Shelley has just success beyond belief in her profession. And for her to sit down and break it down and be honest, which, she was very honest about where the state of the music industry is. And I think from an interviewer standpoint, you have to respect it because she's giving you honest responses to your questions, and it helped the show progress.
Yeah, definitely.
And bring it to different levels. And she mentioned a couple of the artists that she worked with, and really brought it down and kind of showed where she's at in her career and the people that she's hung out with, and it was a good, just well-rounded discussion.
Yeah, and that's what we don't want people to hold back when they come on our show. We always tell them that. Be yourselves. We like to give the guests the floor and let them show their personality, and she and everyone else has done that so far.
Yeah, it was an excellent conversation, and folks, I recommend that one as well. But if you haven't noticed yet, I'm kind of saying that about any number of episodes of That'll Play. So, folks, really, you should go back and just start at the beginning and come all the way through. We've highlighted a couple of what I consider to be some of the best episodes, but you're not going to go wrong with any episodes of That'll Play. If you haven't subscribed already back from when I recommended it in September and you're just now getting on board, I'm giving you a second chance to do the right thing. So hit the subscribe button and find them. Leave them a review on iTunes. Before we go, Matt and John, tell them where they can find all this great stuff we've been talking about.
Sure. Like we said, you can go to thatwillplaypod.com. That's our main website. All of our episodes, our mini episodes, and extra content is up there. You could subscribe on iTunes, on Stitcher. We're on Twitter at thatwillplaypod. On Facebook at facebook.com/thatwillplay. And we're on Instagram too, which is a new thing for us, kind of. We're experimenting with that, having fun with it, and that's at thatwillplaypod as well.
Well, great. And guys, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join me here. I always knew I wanted you guys on the Podcast Digest to talk about what you guys are putting out every week with That Will Play. And I'm a big fan. I love what you guys are doing. I'm looking forward to what you guys have coming up. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk to us today.
Oh, you're welcome, Dan.
Yeah,
it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, Dan, thanks a lot. And let me say real quick before we go, like I know I speak for John and myself, but also for the whole podcast community, that we really appreciate what you're doing, and we love your show because you're really highlighting people who are doing something that they're passionate about. And, we've gotten to know a lot of shows through your show. So just, keep on doing what you're doing because you're doing an awesome job, and, we appreciate it.
Yeah, and just to go off on what Matt just said, I think you need a show like yours. I mean, the Podcast Digest definitely brings a different aspect to the game of broadcast, because you're doing everyone else a favor because you're researching these shows. You're going out of your way to really get involved and find out what's going on out there. You're kind of like the gateway to other things.
The gateway drug.
You're the gateway drug to finding
podcast.
You're a gateway podcast to finding these other good talents out there, and that's how these things get big and people start getting audiences.
Yeah.
It's from guys like you doing what you're doing.
Bravo to you, sir.
So thank you, sir.
Well, I greatly appreciate that, gentlemen, and I'm glad you've found some other great stuff through the Podcast Digest. That is my goal and my intention. And, folks, I hope that you, too, will subscribe to the Podcast Digest. Take a listen. Follow the show on Twitter at Pod Digest, Facebook.com/The Podcast Digest, or provide me feedback, show suggestions, complaints, compliments, anything you like, via the Gmail, the Podcast Digest at gmail.com. Thank you guys very much for taking the time to listen. And my name's Dan Lizette, and I will talk to you guys next week.